Good morning, welcome back. All right, we'll say good morning, good morning. Let's begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's shir. Oh, forgot to hit this, sorry. All right, we'll say good morning, good morning. Let's go begin to thank our sponsors for this morning's shir, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the year of Tafshin Pei 5785, the Tilsa Mishpach of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the shiurim and drushos this year as a schus b'soros tovos for all of Am Yisrael. Sorry, did I do over here? Oh, okay, good. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Abad Lein Latova, Steve and Terry Zin, for dedicating all the shiurim and drushos this month in honor of the birth of their granddaughter Devar Eliana Zin and creation of the Yarzeit of Dr. Zin's father Bunim Tzvi Ben Chaim Shmuel Rabin Karabkin, and the schus refuah shlema for Rabin's cousin serving in the IDF Binyamin Chaim Pesach Ben Moshe Chana, and the creation of the Yarzeit of Rabin's mother Pesam Mira Bas Chaim, Dr. Moshe and Ann Ellen Gevant, in memory of Dr. Gevant's parents Yaakov Meir Ben Moshe Leib and Sheena Bas Abba. Dr. Bezad and Yamina Salfer of Los Angeles dedicating the shiurim and drushos this month in the merit of a refuah shlema for Esther Bracha Bas Chaya. And our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Yankee and Elisa Statman and Yitzi and Rebecca Statman in the schus of a refuah shlema for Chaya Rivka Bas Nechama. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, all of those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. The Ribbon Shalom should bring home our hostages, b'shalom and b'karav, and should allow our holy soldiers to be successful. B'chol ma'asei yedehem. But with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Baruch Hashem. Today's daf is Kuf Mem Tes 149. We are picking up on Kuf Mem Ches Amud Beis 140. Oh, thank you, Steve. 148b in the wide lines. Ibaylahu, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, about 18 lines up from the bottom. See, Ibaylahu, the Gemara asks a shayla. Chazara b'mikzas, havi chazara b'kula olo. So Rabbi says, remember again, we actually started on this a little bit yesterday. We know that even when a shchiv meirah goes ahead and gifts property, he has the ability to retract it if he wants. Right? He has the ability to pull it. This is before he dies. Rabbi say, by the way, just to outline this, we're going to talk more about this morning. But generally, the way that a matana of a shchiv meirah works is as follows. You have shchiv meirah. Shchiv meirah wants to convey property to someone. So what does he do? He gifts it to someone. But when does the gift actually take effect? When does it take effect? When he dies. Now, by the way, this is an important dynamic. That's why he has the ability to go ahead and retract. Right? He has the ability. I changed my mind because remember, nothing's actually given until shchiv meirah dies, which, by the way, is very important because this is also the connection between shchiv meirah and Yerusha. Remember again, already 2 days ago, the Gemara highlighted the idea that according to the opinions that the concept of matna shchiv meirah was a deoraisa, the psukim that the Gemara was quoting were the psukim of Yerusha. But it bothered us because shchiv meirah is a matana and Yerusha is inheritance. But what's the commonality between Yerusha and shchiv meirah? See, here it's this exact point. Generally, you cannot give a posthumous gift. In order to give a gift, there has to be a living donor. There's no such thing as a posthumous gift. Only thing you could do posthumously is inheritance, Yerusha. So what's interesting is the only posthumous gift that exists is a matnas shchiv meirah. So therefore, Chazal, we go with the approach that matnas shchiv meirah is a dirabanan. So therefore, again, when Chazal created this concept of matnas shchiv meirah, said that a shchiv meirah could essentially award gifts during his lifetime that will only take effect posthumously, they modeled it after the only other posthumous mechanism of conveyance, which is Yerusha, which is inheritance. So that's why there's this linkage between matna shchiv meirah and Yerusha. So now both say, remember, shchiv meirah is gifting away property. Gift is not really taking effect until after he dies. So therefore, again, between the time of the gift and his death, if he wants to go ahead and change stuff up, right? So shchiv meirah gave this to Reuben. I don't want to give it to Reuben. Reuben didn't come to visit me. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to Shimon. So he has the ability to do that. The shaila the Gemara is asking over here, when he, let's say, retracts on part of the gift, does that represent a complete retraction or not? Now, to illustrate this, take a look at Take a look at the Rashbam. So the Rashbam says over here, it's right before the lines get wide, about 6 lines before the lines get wide. Here we go. Shchimira shekasav kol nechasav la'acher. Right. So Shchimira went ahead and wrote his property to Ruvain. He gifted his property to Ruvain. The Chazer bo b'miktsas v'nason shuv la'acher shar yachal la'asos kein kidarina daitiki mevatal statiki berkin la'el. So listen to this. So now Shchimira originally went ahead and said, I hereby give all of my property to Ruvain. Then Shchimira has a change of heart, and he says, "You know what? So let's say he gifted 10 fields to Ruvain. He says, you know what? I changed my mind. I want to give 5 fields to Shimon. I want to give 5 fields to Shimon." So now we'll say, what's the shayla? Mi havi chazar b'chol hanachasim shenasan l'rishon. So the shayla is, okay, here's what I know. What do I know? I know that he gave 5 fields to Shimon. What's the shayla? The shayla is, what about the other 5 fields? Is he leaving those in the possession of Ruvain? Or do we say no? Effectively, what he's done is he's kind of taken them back for himself. In other words, he's fully negated. See here what's happening over here? Originally, he gifted his entire estate, 10 fields to Ruvain. Then he changed his mind. I'm giving 5 fields, half of it to Shimon. So what about the other half? Do we say that the other half remains in the possession of Ruvain? Right? Or no? Since he reneged on part of the gift, clearly what he did is he reneged on the entire gift, and therefore, again, the other 5 fields are coming back into his estate. So now let's read in the Rashbam. Mi havye chazar b'chol nechasim. Do we say that he's effectively reneged on the entire gift to Ruvain? Shenasan l'rishon. The gali daite shemis charit b'rishon. Because clearly by reassigning part of the estate to Shimon, it is clear that he doesn't really want to give to Ruvain. Uma shenasan l'sheni matana b'miksasi di'ika shir v'havye matana v'asi yushna mafki miyad rishon. So do we see on one hand, since he's clearly retracted on part of the gift, so therefore again it's clearly he doesn't really want Ruvain to have anything. So therefore again he gave part of it to Shimon, but the other part that he didn't give to Shimon, when Shchimira dies, the heirs of Shchimira have the ability to claw back from Ruvain. Or maybe not. Maybe at the end of the day, look, the part that he assigned to Shimon obviously goes to Shimon, but the other part remains in the possession of Ruvain. Right? In other words, why should it? So that's our shaylas. Right? Now back to the Gemara. See, chazar b'miksas, when Shchimira reneges on part of the gift, havi chazara bekula olo. Is it a full reneging on the entire gift, or no? Only the part that he assigned to Shimon goes to Shimon, but the other part remains with Ruvain. That's our shayla. So Tashma, let's analyze kula on the rishon mitzas and the sheni. Sheni kana, rishon lo kana. So the Gemara brings down this case. If you take a look at the Rashbam again, second wide line, he says, "Titzanya kula l'rishon b'matna Shchimira mitzas u'nasan l'sheni shechazra mitzas." So again, I will say this is our case. Shchimira originally assigns his estate to Ruvain, u'mitzas l'sheni. Then he changes his mind and he goes in and he gives part of it to Shimon. So what's the halacha? Sheni kana rishon lo kana. Shimon acquires his portion. Ruvain does not acquire his portion. So the Gemara says, "Okay, what's going on over here? My lav bishames." Are we not talking about a case where the Shchimira died? To which the Gemara says, no, lo bisha amad. No, it's actually talking about a case where the Shchimira recovered. So the Gemara says, Haganai mistabra. This seems to be clear why. Midiktani seifa miksasan l'rishon v'kulan l'sheni. If you look at the Seifa says that if he assigned part of it to Ruvain and gave all of it to Shimon, Rishon Kana, so Ruvain acquires his portion, Sheni Lo Kana, and Shimon acquires nothing. If we're talking about a case of recovery, Mishum Hachi Sheni Lo Kana. Therefore, again, Shimon didn't acquire anything. But if we say that it's a case where Ruvain died, so the Gemara says, then ultimately, again, they should both acquire. We could even set it up in a case where the Shchimira recovered. If you want to say that partial reneging is effectively total reneging, so the Gemara says, then again, I understand why Shimon would at least acquire or his part. But if you hold that ultimately, again, partial reneging is not effectively total reneging, then halacha l'maisa, neither of them should acquire. So let's say, fine, the Gemara goes back and forth. Bottom line, the hilchasa, Chazara b'mikzas havya chazara. So we'll say, what is the bottom line halacha? The bottom line halacha is chazara b'mikzas havya chazara, which means, so we'll say, for our purposes, it's very important. So just to illustrate this, what this means in outwards, what the Gemara is suggesting is, Ruvain goes ahead, or Shchimera assigns his estate to Ruvain, right? I'm gifting my estate, Shchimera is gifting his estate to Ruvain. While Shchimera is still alive, he has a change of heart. He says, I want to give to Ruvain. I want to give 50%, right? I want to give 50% of the gift I gave to Ruvain to Shimon. Okay, so now it goes to Shimon, and the Gemara says, but what that effectively shows is really, he's fully reneging on the gift to Ruvain. The way the halach understands this is, by pulling away some of the property from Ruvain, he's effectively pulling away all of the property from Ruvain. So therefore, the part that is assigned to Shimon will go to Shimon, and the rest of it comes back to the estate. Right, the rest of it comes back to the estate. So that's how the Gemara's paskin over here. Chazar b'mikzas havya chazara. So we'll say, I'll just mention, there's a tremendous and beautiful Musar Haskell in this as well. And what is that? So we'll say chazara is also a lashon of tshuva. We know in the Gemara of Elisha ben Avuya, when the famous story of Elisha ben Avuya Acher, when Elisha ben Avuya leaves the path. If you don't know with this story, we'll go into it a different time. But one of the most profound and incredible, overwhelming stories of tshuva that didn't quite occur. So Elisha ben Avuya goes off the path, and all of his rabbinic colleagues essentially take leave of him, except for Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, his devoted disciple, is always trying to get him to come back, and they have multiple discussions. And the lashon that Rabbi Meir always uses with Elisha ben Avuya is chazar b'cha, come back, right? Because that's what tshuva is. We translate tshuva as repentance. No one knows actually what that word actually means, right? But tshuva is a lashon of lashuv, to return. Chet, sin, distances me from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tshuva is the process by which I return. So tshuva is also referred to as a chazara. A chazara. I'm coming back to where I was. I'm coming back to who I was. I'm coming back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if you look at these words, also there's something so profound over here. Sometimes we think that tshuva is an all or nothing proposal. Right? Either get it right, or I'll give you an example. Let's say I struggle with a particular avera. That's not a hypothetical, right? In other words, I struggle with a particular avera. So I decide that, I'm stopping to do that avera. And what happens? And I'm really good. I'm really good for a week. I'm really good for 2 weeks. And then what happens? I fall off the wagon. I relapse and I commit the avera again. So a lot of times we think to ourselves, well, obviously, all of that period of avera abstinence was meaningless, right? All that time of avera sobriety, right, was meaningless because look, I just relapsed, I fell off the wagon again. But the answer is that's not true. In other words, every little unit of tshuva, every little unit of return, every little unit of chazara, everything I do to try to make myself a better person, even if it's not consistent, and even if I'm not able to keep it up, it changes me. It has a profound impact. And I say, look at these words of the Gemara. This is like a mantra. The Hilchasa. I will say, what is halacha l'maisa of Yiddishkeit? Chazara b'mikzas havya chazara. Even a partial tshuva, even a partial chazara is still considered to be tshuva. Never think that tshuva is absolute. Never look at a Yiddishkeit or our relationship with Baruch Hu as an absolute. There are ups and downs. There are wins and there are losses. There are successes and failures. And the failures don't take away from the successes. And the losses don't take away from the wins. Because chazara b'mikzas havya chazara. Even a partial return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even if it's not sustained, is still something so meaningful in the eyes of the Ribbon Shalom. Incredible. I would say that's, every once in a while you come across like a phrase that is literally a mantra for Yiddishkeit, a mantra for life. This is one of them. Chazara b'mikzas havya chazara. So the next time you fall off the wagon, which some of us, it already happened, right? I've only been up for 15 minutes, right? But again, that's the nature of life. Don't become despondent, because whatever you've done, even if you can't sustain it, chazara b'mikzas havya chazara. Incredible. So Gemara Mishkachos Lo. Bein shemes, bein shamad. So we'll say the first part of the brayso, you can see in a case whether the shemira went ahead and died or recovered. But the last part of the brayso can only be found or can only be reconciled in a case where the shemira recovered. Okay. See, so we'll say some further applications of this concept, which is quite interesting. Look at this case. Here's an interesting one, right? So shemira is on his deathbed, and what does he do? He decides to dedicate all of his property to the shul, right? He's makdish it, right? He hears about the campaign. He says, you know what, I'm makdish all of my nechasim. So what happens? So fantastic, right? He's a hero. Only one problem. He gets better, right? He recovers, right? So now we have time for that awkward conversation, right? I got better. What now? So we'll say. So again, remember in the Beis Hamikdash context, this is hekdish. See, he's makdish his property to the Beis Hamikdash, and now again, because he's a shchimira. Now he gets better. Mahu. So what's the halacha? What do you do in this case? Mi amrinon kol legabe hekdish gamra umakni. So do we say, look, whenever it comes to hekdish, right? A person is makdish. When a person is makdish, they do a wholehearted hekdish, and therefore, again, essentially, to use the legal term, no backsies. That's it. You cannot renege on hekdish. Ol dilma kol legabe nafshe lo gamra makne, or maybe not. In other words, let's understand over here. Shchimira gifted away his property. Why did he gift away his property? Because he thought he was going to die. His intention is never to leave himself destitute. So therefore, again, in this, as much as yes, it's a beautiful gesture that he was makdish everything to the Beis Hamikdash, but lemaisa, that is only with the intention that he's going to, not intention, with the understanding he was going to die. But if he's not going to die, that changes the math on everything. So the Gemara says, a similar case, hifkir kol nechasav mahu. So we'll say, what if a person made all of his property hefker? Now again, pretty dramatic thing as well. I mean, all of his property hefker. So what is that? And now again, I will say the parenthesis is, and he recovers. Now remember again, all of this, just to be clear, this is why it's so important to understand the mechanics of shchimira. The way shchimira works is shchimira is doing something that is going to take effect posthumously, right? So anything he does, matana, hegdish, hefker, this is all after he dies. Remember, going back again, that's the connection between matna shchimira and Yerusha. That's why again, Shchimra is derivative of Yerusha. So what happens if he was mafkir his property? So the Gemara says, and then he recovers. Mahu mi'amiran kevin da'afla anim kashirim gamar umakni. So do we say, look, since in hefker there is a benefit to the rich and to the poor, right? Because when you're mafkir something, anyone could acquire it. So maybe since there's also a potential benefit to the poor, you can't renege on that. Odil makol legabe nafshe lo gamar umakni. Or maybe halacha l'maisa. No, I was supposed to say anytime that there's a matna shchimira, what's the shchimira's intention? Is to benefit someone else, but it's never to put himself in a detrimental position. So in any of these cases where he recovers, of course he would want to be able to walk back the gift. Similarly, again, what about the following case? What if he gave his estate to tzedakah? In other words, so Shchimira says, when I die, hereby gift this estate to the Anim, to tzedakah. And then I will say, then what happens? He recovers. Mi arminon tzedakah vaday migmar gamar umakni. So do we say, look, tzedakah, certainly he's conveying. Right? Tzedakah, certainly he's giving it over. Right? He has, and he's not going to walk it back. Oh, Zalma, no. So we keep coming back to that same concept. Maybe, again, as much as the Shechimah is willing to do good with his estate, that presupposes that what? He's not going to need it. But if he's going to need it, he's walking back all of these gifts. To which the Gemara answers in all of these cases, Teku. The Gemara leaves it open-ended. Okay. The Gemara goes weiter. So Amar Rav Sheshes, most of the last two lines. Rav Sheshes, Yital v'yiske, v'yachzik v'yikne, kulan lashomatane. So now Rav Sheshes gets into a little bit more the lashonos of a matnas shchimira. Right? What's the type of verbiage that a shchimira would use in order to make a gift? So he says, for example, Yital, take, yiske, which literally means like acquire, yachzik, take hold of or also acquire, yikne, also acquire, kulan lashomatana. These are all expressions of gift giving. So the Gemara says, af yachsin v'yaras b'ray liyarsho. So remember again, interestingly enough, if the Shechimah uses lashon of yachsin and yaras, these are expressions of Yerusha. These also work. Now who do they work with? They work with people who are in the inheritance line of the Shechimah. Now you ask yourself, one second, why does the Shchimira have to go ahead and gift to anyone who's in his inheritance line? So remember why? We'll say, for Rabbi Yochanan ben Berokahi. And it goes like Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Well, so remember Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka? So you think it to yourself, absolutely not, right? So, okay, I'll remind you. Who is Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka? So the Rashbam. I didn't either until I saw the Rashbam, don't worry. So the Rashbam highlights, Rashbam is the one who says that a person could go ahead and gift property or will property to someone who is in his inheritance line, even if he's not the necessarily first in line for inheritance, right? So essentially, Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka says, as long as someone is in your inheritance line, you could get property to them through the mechanism of Yerusha. So therefore, again, I will say, here would be a perfect example of this. Let's say Shchimira has whatever it is, brothers or other, and he wants them to get property as well, or daughters. So again, halach l'maisa, because they are in the inheritance line, he could shift property to them through the mechanism of a matnas shchivmira. And again, for those people who are roi to inherit in some way, you use these lashonos of inheritance. Okay, I mean you don't have to. You could use gift lashonos also, but these expressions of inheritance work for people who are in your inheritance line. Ibaylo, go to we'll say Gemara Kasha. Top of Kuf Mem Tes 149. Today's daf. So the Gemara says as follows: mahu. So this is interesting. What happens if the Shchimira gives a matana to someone, and the lashon, the expression that he uses is yehene, right? So I give right. So Shchimira gives his property to Ruvain. Ruvain, I want you to benefit from this property. So the shaila is like, what does that mean? What does yehana mean? So mahu. So the Gemara says, Dine have kula matana ka'amar, ol dilma lishani minayu midi ka'amar. So what is Ruvain, right? What is Shchimra saying? So Shchimra says, I want Ruvain to benefit from my property. So what is that? What is that? Is that saying that Shchimira is giving the property to Ruvain? Or he's just saying, no, Ruvain, I'm happy for you to benefit from my property. But so you hear the shaila? Because again, this is not a classic, that's why the Gemara started with Rav Shesh's statement. This is not a classic lashon of conveyance. Yana, to benefit, sounds somewhat ambiguous. So again, is that conveyance of ownership? Or is that just saying, feel free to get some benefit from it? So the Gemara says, Yeirah bahen, it's another question, Yeirah bahen mau. Similar idea. What happens if Shchimira says, I would like Ruvain to be seen in my property? Okay? Ya'amod bahen, I want him to stand in my property. Yishan bahen, I want him to lean on my property. Mahu, what is the halacha in all of these cases? To which the Gemara answers, teku. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, what you begin to see is as follows. So you begin to see essentially there's like three buckets of lashonos. Bucket number one are expressions that represent conveyance. Great, that works for everyone, all cases. Bucket number two are expressions that connote inheritance. Those work for people who are in the inheritance line in some way. Third bucket are expressions of usage. Those expressions, we're not sure what they do. We're not sure what they do. Do they just allow for some level of usage, or do they actually go ahead and convey ownership? So that is as of now still somewhat unclear. Okay. Ibailahu. So ask another kasha. Machar kol nechasav mahu. So we'll say, so this is very interesting. So what happens if the Shchimira sold his property? So we'll say, we hear what's happening over here. So up until now, what we've been focusing on is a matana of a Shchimira. Shchimira gifts property. And remember again, what's the principle with a gift? The way it works is like this. Everything depends on what is he gifting, right? If he's gifting some of his property, right, and keeping some of it, then that is not considered a matna Shchimira. That is just considered a bona fide gift. And even if the Shchimira recovers, the gift is not reversible. But if the Shchimira goes ahead and gifts his entire estate, and he gives everything away, then that we view that almost like what? We saw this yesterday, like a gift with a t'nai, with the condition. What's the condition? If I die. So obviously if he doesn't die and he recovers, so he's able to go ahead and claw back the gift. He's able to get back the gift. So now the Gemara asks an interesting question. What happens if it's not a gift, but instead Shchimira sells all of his property? He liquidates his estate. He sells it off. So I say, now what's the shaila? Do we treat the sale of a Shchimira like the gift of a shchimera. In other words, do we say that clearly since he's liquidating his estate, right, he's selling off all of his property, it's a sale almost done with a t'nai. And what's the t'nai? That he's going to die. And therefore, if he recovers, the sale is reversible. So the Gemara says, here we go. So Yibaylo Macha Kol Nechasam Mao. Some Rabbi Yehuda Marav Im Amad Eno Chozer. So Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Rav that halacha l'maisa, if he recovers, he cannot retract. A sale is different than a gift, and a sale is going to be valid under all circumstances, and therefore, even if he recovers, halacha l'maisa, he can't retract it. Listen to this. The Zindin Am Rabbi Yehuda Marav Im Amad Chozer. It's interesting. So that's Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Rav sometimes, and other times Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Rav that if he recovers, he can take back the gift. The Gemara says, okay. So the Gemara says, V'lo pligi. It's not Rabbi Yehuda is not Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Rav, is not contradicting himself. Had de isnu lezuzi beinayu, had de par inhu bechovo. So we'll say this is interesting. It's not a contradiction. One case is referring ultimately again to a shchimera liquidated his estate, but has all of the money in his bank account. The other is where he liquidated the estate and he paid off his debts. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam says, Tap Rashbam, Hadesnu beinahu, Chozer de lahachi shavkinhu, im e'amal mechali achzireim. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, this is fascinating. In the case where he holds onto the money, so we'll say, so interestingly enough, the Gemara understands that is with a t'nai. Why? Why does he hold on to why is he holding on to the money? Because in the event that he recovers, he wants to be able to go ahead and return the money to the purchasers. So the fact that he holds on to the money indicates that he's holding in his mind, maybe I'll recover. If I recover, I want my property back. So therefore, again, he doesn't spend the money, he holds on to it. In that kind of case, ultimately, the gift will revert. On the other hand, if he used the money to go ahead and pay off his debts, then what does that show? That ultimately, again, he has no intentions of ever purchasing back the estates, which indicates to us that this is the properties, which indicates to us that this is an unequivocal gift. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, even if he recovers, he cannot claw back the properties or purchase back the properties. Okay, fascinating. Ibaylahu. Another kasha. So also this is very interesting. Shchimera shahoda mahu. Okay, so this is fascinating, and this is fascinating not just because of shchimera, but because it opens the door to a brand new kinyan that perhaps many of us never heard of before. So here's the shayla. It says shchimera is on his deathbed. And what does shchimera do? Shchimera says, I need to get something off my chest, right? I need to share with everyone that the 5 fields that I own, in the north, they're not mine. They're not mine. They belong to Ruvain. He's moda, right? He admits that he does not own this property. So the shaila is, what's the status of that admission? Now, take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. So we'll say, look at the Rashbam. It's the 3rd line down from the top. While he's ill, he says, Sada umaos halalu shalploni. Now, by the way, it could be real estate, it could be money. It doesn't really matter what it is. Maybe it even works better. Like with a metaltalin, right? He says again, this item that everyone has thought is in my possession, in fact, does not belong to me. It belongs to Ruvain. So the Gemara says, this first short line in the Rashbam, Shainu Yodin Shein Shel Zamod. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, so we're not sure what to do with this admission. So the Rashbam is pointing out over here, and the Gemara that he quotes in Sanhedrin talks about this idea that sometimes wealthy people would deny that they owned certain property in order to make themselves not appear as wealthy. Whether it's Ayin Hara, whether it's whatever it might be. So the shaila is, when Ruvain does this, is Ruvain kind of looking to minimize the vastness of what his estate looks like, and therefore again he doesn't really mean that the property belongs to someone else. He's just saying that to minimize the wealth of what he possesses, or maybe not. Maybe he's really telling the truth, and actually again halacha l'maisa, he really is trying to come clean. He wants to leave this world with a clean slate, and he's admitting that stuff that he owns is not really his. That's the shaila. That's the shaila. So I'll say, now listen to this. The Gemara introduces a fascinating story here. So Tashma, the Gemara tells the story. The Isser Giyura Hava. So we'll say, so listen to this. There was a guy by the name of Isser, and he was known as Isser the convert. Isser the convert. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, Interestingly enough, so it's fascinating that you would call someone Isser the convert. Generally, when a person converts, right, we don't go ahead and call them, hey, look everybody, it's Chaim the convert, right? Like, hey, come over here, let's make a l'chaim together, right? In other words, you don't normally do that, just because again, it's part of a sensitivity that we have to the ger. We just don't do it. So it's fascinating to see that this guy Isser is forever known as Isser the convert, Isser Giyura. Now, the reason he's known as Isser Giyura is we're going to see that's a very important piece in the story, but there's a backstory to this. Take a look at the Rashbam. Who is this guy Isser? Also quite a look at the Rashbam. The Isser, who Isser Giyura sheba al Rochel bas Mar Shmuel kodem shenis gayer v'nis Abrahimenu begius esrav Mari bar Machar. So we'll say there's a story over here. The daughter of Shmuel was taken captive. She was taken captive by a guy, a non-Jew, by the name of Isser. She was violated by her captors, the daughter of Shmuel. She was violated by her captor. She became pregnant. Somehow, over the course of this relationship, she developed a connection with her captor, and the guy converted. He converted. His name was Isser, right? He converted. He becomes known as Isser Giyura. So the daughter of Shmuel, Rachel gives birth to a boy. That boy becomes none other than Rav Mari. Rav Mari of the Gemara. Rav Mari. So Rav Mari's father, his biological father, was a non-Jew. So now, but something interesting happened. That's why, by the way, Rav Mari is known throughout Shas as Rav Mari Bas Rachel. He's known ultimately again, or Rav Mari Bar Rachel, Ben Rachel. He's known as Rav Mari, the son of Rachel, because his father, he doesn't, from a halachic perspective, he doesn't have a father. Now, what's fascinating to note over here is Isser converted. Now, when did Isser convert? So at the time that he impregnated Rachel, he was not Jewish. But by the time that Rachel gave birth, he was Jewish. So when young Rav Mari was born, so his biological father, who was not his halachic father, had already converted, which quite. Right? You think your family has issues, right? I'm just saying, right? So the Maisa, a little bit of a complicated matzav, as they say. Okay, so what happens? Let's go back over here. So the Gemara says, Rav Mari Barei, Horaso Shalo Bikdusha. I'm sorry, let me go back. Isser Giyura, Haveli Tracer Alfe Zuzi Beirav. So let's listen to this. So this guy Isser, had 12,000 zuzim. Now, he deposited the 12,000 zuzim with Rava. Okay, so now, part one of the story. Rav Mari Barei, Rav Mari, who was the biological son of Isser Giyura, but not the halachic son of Isser Giyura. Harasa Shalo B'Kedusha V'Leidasa B'Kedusha. He was conceived, what we call conceived, not in a state of Kedusha, but was born in a state of Kedusha, which means when he was conceived, his father was not Jewish, his biological father was not Jewish, but by the time he was born, his biological father, not halachic father, but his biological father was Jewish. Okay? And at this time, Rav Mari was in yeshiva. Mari was in yeshiva. Now you're going to see, I think, why that's meaning he was young. He was in yeshiva. I'll tell you why I think that detail is important in just a moment. Amar Rava. So now listen to this. Here was the concern. Now this is a fascinating story. So we'll say, now remember, Rava is in possession. Rava's holding the money for Isser. Isser apparently was ill. So now Rava, what was Rava? Okay, what was Rava anticipating was going to happen? I want to say looking forward. What was he anticipating? Isser was going to die. Isser was a ger, which means in this particular context, right, Isser had no more children after he converted, which means that technically speaking, Isser was a ger with no inheritors. Right? No inheritors. Which meant that when Isser died, what happens to his property? Hefker. Who's in possession of those 12,000 zuzim? Rava. So Rava wants to make sure that when Isser dies, it shouldn't happen too soon, but also why should he suffer prolonged, right? So what happened that when Isser dies, that Rava gets the property and that it doesn't go to Rav Mari. He wants it for himself. We'll say there's definitely more to this backstory that the Gemara is not sure this, but I think perhaps we'll see why there's attention over here. Some Rabba, so Rabba said this is fascinating. So Rabba says like this: So Rabba wants to understand. Look, I want to obviously I'd like to possess this money after Isser dies. So let me think. What possibilities would exist for Rav Mari to possibly acquire this money? Ibi Yerusha, La Yerusha. So it's not going to be Yerusha. It's not gonna, right? So Rav Mari is not an inheritor. Why is Rav Mari not an inheritor of Isser? Why not? Why not? Because halachically they're not related. I will say, it's always like hard to say because again, clearly Isser is his biological father, right? But halachically they're not related, and therefore again, Rav Mari is not an inheritor. Okay. Both say this is fascinating. Watch this. This is why we spent some time with this concept at the beginning of the shir. But okay, so maybe you'll say, 1 second. Let Isser make a deathbed gift of matnas shchimira, right? And he could gift the property to Isser. The Gemara says that's not going to work. Why? The Gemara says because matnas shchimira kirusha shavur rabanan. Matnas shchimira is a derivative of Yerusha. This is what we spoke about at the beginning of the shir today. Kol heicha de ise b'Yerusha ise b'matana. Kol heicha de lese b'Yerusha lese b'matana. So this is fascinating. So halacha l'maisa, that wherever ultimately again a person is subject to Yerusha in the parsha of Yerusha, they can make a matna shchimira. If they're not in the parsha of Yerusha, they can't make a matna shchimira. Now what does that mean? What does that mean? So Rabbi say, look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam says, Ger lav bar arusi drachmona afkre lezare de oved kochavim. So Rabbi say, what it's saying over here is like this: if you are someone who has people who are subject to Yerusha, then you could make a matna shchimira to whoever you want. But if you're not in the parsha of Yerusha, then you can't make a matna shchimira. In this case, Isser was not in the parsha of Yerusha. Why is he not in the parsha of Yerusha? Why not? Because he has no halachic heirs. This is such a fascinating detail. When can you avail yourself of matna shchimira? When you have people to halachically inherit you. Now, you don't have to give the gift to them, but because you see what's happening over here, that's why I spent so much time on the beginning of the shir. Because matna shchimira is a derivative of Yerusha, you have to halachically be in the parsha of Yerusha in order to make a matnas shchimira. If you are not in the parsha of Yerusha, meaning you do not possess halachic heirs, you cannot make a halachic deathbed gift. So because Isser ultimately is not in the parsha of Yerusha, therefore he cannot go ahead and make a matna shchimira. So therefore again, there's no Yerusha, there's no matna shchimira. Even Mashicha, less nugabe, right? So again, if it's about Mashicha, so here's the issue. Rav Mari doesn't have the money, I have the money, all right? Ibe chalipin, maybe a king in chalipin, ein matber nikne bechalip, back to Rabbi Matzia days. So ultimately again, if it's about chalipin, so then halacha l'maisa again, you cannot acquire money through chalipin. We established that. I agav karka, less like karka. Maybe Isser will convey the money to his son Rav Mari through karka. He'll give him a piece of land and he'll acquire it agav karka. But remember again, kinyan agav doesn't require the metaltalin. We pass it this way. It doesn't require the metaltalin to be piled on top of the karka, but rather again, you could give over karka, and by dint of the karka, you could acquire metaltalin. What's the issue? So again, Rava said no problem there because Isser didn't have any karka. Iba ma'amad shlashtan. This is great. What about ma'amad shlashtan? We'll say we had ma'amad shlashtan yesterday. What's ma'amad shlashtan? Ma'amad shlashtan is you could assign something to a third party when all of the interested parties are present, right? So technically speaking, if Isser, Rava, and Rav Mari were all to be present, so Isser could say, I hereby transfer the money ultimately over to my son Rav Mari. So Rava said, if that's going to happen, no, Ishalach li lo azlinan. I'm not showing up for that, right? So Rava says, I'm not showing up. I'm not going, and therefore again there'll be no way to go ahead and transfer the money. So maskifla Rav Ika Breid Rav. So I'll say, so interestingly enough, this conversation is happening in the Beis Medrash, and you'll see why this is important for the narrative also. So what happens? So they're having this conversation, and Rava, who's in possession of the money, wants to make sure that he holds on to it at the time that Isser dies. So he's trying to figure out, is there any threat to my ownership of this money? In other words, is there some way for this money to get to Rav Mari? So he's going through all the possibilities. It sounds like there's no way for it to get to Rav Mari. So Maskil Ravika Reid Rabami, Amai, Velodi Isser, Tahalin Zuzei Rav Mari Nino, for Likninu Baodisa. Oh, okay. Okay, so the Gemara is now introducing us to a brand new kinyan. It's called a kinyan odisa. What's a kinyan odisa? Like from hodah, from moda, means you admit that someone else owns this item. So let Isser say, I hereby declare that my son, my biological son, not my halachic son, my biological son, Rav Mari, is the owner of this money. So let him make a kinyan odisa, be moda, and let Rav Mari acquire it that way. So adahachi nafek odisa mibei iser. So we'll say what happened. So as this conversation was happening, suddenly word got back to Rava that Isser made this kinyan odisa. Isser on his deathbed said, I hereby declare that the money belongs to my biological son Rav Mari. Okay, ikbid Rava. Rava was not happy. Rava was not happy. Amar kamagamri ta'nasa le'inshi umafsidili. So interestingly enough, so he said, by the way, take a look at the Rashbam, last Rashbam. He says, Adahachi nafik odisa mitok shnemar beis medrash. Since this whole conversation was taking place in the beis medrash, yotza hakol v'limdua lit on kain. Ultimately, again, so he went ahead, so the word got out, somebody ran over to Isser, they said, Isser, here is the way to convey the money to your son, and ultimately, again, Isser made a kinyan odisa, transferring over the money to his biological son, Rav Mari. So ultimately, again, Rav is not happy. If bid Rava, Amar kamagari tanas inshi mafsidli, some people are teaching other people how to make proper halachic statements and causing me a loss. So Rav is upset, ultimately, again, that he lost out on the money. So I'll point out to you something very interesting, just quickly. So first of all, generally we don't do a kinyan odisa. Generally we don't do it. There is one time of the year that we do a kinyan odisa. Some of you have seen this. We do this during Mechiras Chametz. When we sell, in other words, generally, again, remember, if you're selling Chametz, let's say you fill out your power of attorney, you give it to me, and then I sell the Chametz on behalf of whoever's selling to a non-Jew. We do multiple kinyanim in that transaction with the non-Jew to ensure that the non-Jew understands and that halachically this is a bona fide sale. One of the things that we do is a kinyan odisa. So we pick up the documents, give it over to the non-Jew and say, I hereby admit that all of this chametz belongs to you. Now generally we would not rely on a kinyan odisa by itself. But when doing multiple other kinyanim, it is there. So again, outside of Mechiras Chametz, I don't know how often you see it, but again, it is a fixture of the sale of Chametz each and every year. So we'll say, to be honest, this story also a little bit, it's strange, no? It's a little bit strange, right? Rav is trying to keep the money, what's going on over here. So we'll say, so perhaps, this is what I was thinking about with this story, and to be honest also, I did not have a chance to be ma'ayin too much into what, I'm sure there are many mafarshim, I chatani maskir, I ran out a little, can't say I ran out of time, you never run out of time. I did not use my time appropriately yesterday, and therefore did not allow sufficient time to be able to research this sugya as it should be researched, so I apologize for that, but I think something interesting, if you notice that the Gemara points out that Rav Mari was Beirav. He was in yeshiva. Meaning what? He was young. Perhaps what's happening over here is Rava was very concerned about a young person inheriting a lot of money, because generally young people do not know what to do with a lot of money, and he was concerned that this young and budding Talmid Chacham, I will say, you run into that amount of money as a young person, a lot of things could happen. You leave yeshiva, right? You get involved in all the wrong stuff. You just spend it on things that just are not going to be helpful for you in life. So it's also quite possible that the desire over here of Rava was not to deprive Rav Mari of this money, right? In other words, Rav Mari is Isser's son. He's Isser's son. But will say sometimes even parents, very well-meaning parents, feel like they want to give their children everything, and then they don't realize that giving your children everything is a colossal mistake. Do not give your children everything. Give your children a lot, love them, make them feel loved and secure. Do not give them everything, because if you do, you will spoil them and they will turn into rotten adults. So instead, give them a lot, more the emotional than the material stuff, but give them a lot. But be careful not to give them them everything because you're ruining them if you give them everything. So perhaps that's what's happening over here, and that's why the Gemara felt compelled to add in the Bei Rav, that Rav Mari was still in yeshiva. Rava wanted to hold on to it. Of course I'll give it to his son. Right? I'm going to hold his money. I'm going to keep his money for myself. I'm going to give it to him, but not now. Not now. I'll give it to him when he's a little bit more mature, a little bit more advanced, and ultimately, again, when I can help him structure utilizing it in a more efficient way. Perhaps. Okay, let's go back to on the base. Shir Kar Kol Shu. We got this. Shir Kar Kol Shu. So what happens if halacha l'maisa? So remember again, Shchimira gave away property, but he retained some karka for himself. Then what's the halacha? Matanaso kayames. So Rabbi says, remember again, we spoke. This is the Mishnah. Shchimira gives property away, but he retains a piece of property for himself. So remember again, once you're retaining property for yourself, what does that show? That you have in mind that you may recover, and therefore, but whatever you gift is a bona fide gift, even if you do recover. In other words, the only time that the matan of a shchimira is made al t'nai, that I die, is when everything is gifted away. But if he retains something for himself, then halacha l'maisa, that gift remains even if he recovers. V'kama kol shehu. How much is kol shehu? Right. So in other words, so the lashon of the Gemara over here is if shchimira gives away property but retains something, a little something for himself, then ultimately again, even if he recovers his gift, the gift remains a gift. So how much is kol shehu? So Rabbi Yehuda Amarav karka kedei parnasaso. So he says in the Rav, he retains enough property to support himself. So again, that's how, right, to support himself. Rabbi Yomi bar Abba Amar metaltalin kedei parnasos. Rabbi Yomi bar Abba says it doesn't have to be land, even metaltalin. So he retains enough metaltalin to generate enough support for himself. So therefore, in the event that he recovers, he's not going to be destitute. Amar Rabbi Zera, kama mechuvan shmais esad desabi. What? So Rabbi Zera says, how precise are the words of our elders? Karka taimamai dikai somich alei. The Gemara says, so what happens? He's retaining enough karka to be able to support himself. So this way, again, he has enough in the event that he recovers. Halavai should recover. The gift that he gives that's going to stand. But this way, he does have enough money to live on. Similarly, again, metaltali nami ikoi samech alayu. If he recovers, he'll be able to go ahead and support himself. So both say, so watch this according to this first version. So here's what we know, right? So a person, shchimira, gifts away his entire estate. That is considered to be a gift al t'nai. If I die, the gift is good. If I recover, I'm taking everything back. Now, again, remember, right? Just to understand, say mechanically, nothing's actually been given away, right? Because everything's only given away when shchimira dies. But if I don't die, if shchimira doesn't die, he takes everything back. But if shchimira gives away property, but retains something for himself, then what that says is, this is not a gift al t'nai, just a regular gift. Keep it, I die, I recover, it doesn't make a difference, keep the property. How much does he have to retain in order for it to be a complete gift without a t'nai? So again, according to this first approach, so again, Rabbi Yehuda bar Yirmiyah bar Abba, enough property for him to live on. Whether it's karka, whether it's not. So what he's clearly doing over here by retaining that, what he's showing is, if I recover, I'm retaining enough, metaltalin or karka, to be able to live off of. And therefore, whatever I gifted away, that remains a gift. Mas gift Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, I don't understand. This doesn't make any sense. Umay kavanasa, man damar metaltalin, karka tanan. So first of all, how can you, so Rav Yosef is bothered by this. And Rabbi Yosef said this makes no sense. Why? Because how can you say that it applies to metaltalin? Right? The halacha is the Brisa says, and the Mishnah says karka. Well, the Brisa says karka. It says dafka land. Dafka land, not metaltalin. So the Gemara says, furthermore, mandamar kedei parnasaso kol shu tanan. So the one who says kedei parnasaso, again, I will say, why would you say it's the amount that you need to sustain? That's not what the Mishnah says. What the Brisa says, right? It says kol shu. Both say, what does kol shu mean? Kol shu means any amount. Any amount sounds like what? What does any amount sound like? Any amount. In other words, according to the first approach, this whole thing is operating with the assumption that the shchimira is retaining for himself enough to sustain him, enough karka or enough metaltalin to sustain him. And therefore, once he does that, the gifts that he's giving are non-conditional gifts, and they're binding whether or not he dies or he recovers. Rav Yosef comes along and says, what you're saying is not consistent with the wording of the Brisa. Number one, the Brisa says karka, doesn't say the amount of metaltalin. Number two, the Brisa says kol shu. Kol shu means any amount, lav dafka, the amount that you need to sustain yourself. And I will say, you know what we're going to stop. So Abaye says, by the just I'll tell you, just coming attractions. Abaye says, Amar le Abaye b'chol heicha detani karka dafka. So Abaye says, one second. Do you think every single time the Gemara says karka, that karka only means karka not metaltalin? So we'll go on to my Mitzvah Hashem to prove that point. Rabosai, tremendous day. Tremendous day. Shkayach, everyone. And we are officially caught up. We are officially caught up. We're pretty much caught up with the rest of the shy a few lines. This is pretty good. It's not right. Considering where we started, this is excellent. All right, Chavra, have a great day, everyone.